Hello, my name is Keshwani. That's K-E-S-H-W-A-N-I, Keshwani. I have been solving math problems for GRE out of this book here, practicing to take the GRE general test, the 10th edition. If you do not own this book already, purchase one immediately. You're going to need it in order to prepare for the exam. The problem that I'm about to solve is the one that you're going to find on page number 328. Quantitative comparison questions, hence the QC. Number 15, the very last one. Before I actually solve this problem, let's remind ourselves some things that we need to know here. Do you know what this equals to? A plus B whole square. This is how it's read. A, people sometimes read this as A plus B squared. That is not correct. What I just wrote here, A plus B squared, is this. A plus B squared. That's what that is. It is to be read, this quantity is to be read, A plus B whole squared. Whole tells me that I have to square everything that I heard before. A plus B whole squared. And what is it equal to? And if you do not remember, it's okay, it's not a big deal. If you do not remember in the exam, just do it out. It only takes a few seconds. A plus B whole squared is same as A plus B times A plus B. And then you have to do your FOIL. It's a mnemonic that people use. I actually don't remember what it is, what it stands for. American use it, FOIL they call it. First out, inner last, something the hell like that. This is how it goes. A times A is A squared. And A times B is A times B plus AB, and then B, positive B times positive A is another A times B right here, and then finally we have positive B times positive B, which is your B squared. For those of you who are watching outside the US and do not know what the hell I'm talking about, forget about this thing. Pretend I never mentioned it. It is a peculiar thing. It was a peculiar thing for me too when I first heard it. That's what they call it, FOIL they call it. And sometimes some people have trouble foiling, and therefore they foil in their endeavor to foil. Look up the meaning of the word foil again. The foil that we were using before was used as a mnemonic, as an acronym rather. It was used as an acronym which stands for first out, inner last, something like that, something to that effect. But that of course is an acronym. Here I'm using the word FOIL as a word. Pick up the word dictionary and look up what it means to foil. Foil means to thwart. To thwart, to be stymied, to fail in whatever it is that you're doing, to have trouble with whatever it is that you're doing. That's what foil means. And that's why I was being funny here, because sometimes some people do not know exactly how to foil, and therefore they foil in their endeavor to foil. Get it? Anyway, enough of the fun. So that's what that is. A plus B whole squared equals A plus B whole squared equals A squared plus AB plus AB, that's 2AB plus B squared. And that is what we're going to need. That is what we're going to need in this particular question. So now let's solve our problem. Okay. I need to erase all of this thing. I want to erase this. I want to erase that. And when I say pick up the dictionary and look it up and learn it, it means exactly that. You must own a dictionary, a proper dictionary. I am surprised to see how many people in their entire life have never bothered to buy a bloody dictionary. You must have a dictionary and you must have a discipline to look up words as you come across in your reading. Most people do not do that. They are lazy. They don't look up the words. They just try to figure out the meaning of the word from the context. You must learn the words properly. Okay, anyway, enough of the thing. I do not know why I have these uncontrollable urges. No, I'm not talking about anything else. I'm talking about uncontrollable urges to break into sermons. Do you understand? We won't talk about other matter right now because we don't have the time. So R plus S whole squared would equal R squared plus 2 times R plus S squared, just like before. Before we had A and B. Instead of A and B, we have R and S. A plus B whole squared would have been A squared plus 2AB plus B squared. Instead of, here's your A squared plus 2AB plus B squared. You see? A plus B whole squared. So that's what they have in the first column. R plus S. R plus S, well actually they use small r, I use capital R, so I'm going to stick with my capital R's. So if you open the quantity that they give you in the first column, it boils down to this: R squared plus 2 times R times S plus S squared. That's your column A. Let's see what they give us in column B. In column B they tell us R squared plus S squared. And they want us to compare the two quantities. So let's compare them. Let's compare the two quantities. Well, the very first thing we can do here, for example, if I ask you which quantity is bigger, 37 plus of 54 or 37 plus 91. If I ask you which quantity is bigger, you could actually sit there and add up these two numbers, and then sit there and add up these two numbers, and then proudly announce to me that this quantity is bigger than this quantity. But if you were to do that, you will have forgotten what this quantity. You would have forgotten what these questions are called. These questions are called quantitative comparison. Your job is to compare the two quantities, not compute the bloody things, as I always say. If I were to add these two numbers and then add up these two numbers and then tell you that this is bigger than this, that's not the point here. The point here is that 37 appears in both columns. So if I were to subtract 37 from this column and subtract 37 from this column, which I am allowed to do that as long as I subtract the same number from the both columns, we can do it. This 37 disappears. And basically we're comparing 54 versus 91. That's all. And of course 91 is bigger than 54, which is exactly what we're going to do here. R squared appears in both columns. So I'm going to subtract R squared. We're going to subtract R squared from both columns. So if I were to subtract R squared from here and subtract R squared from here, this R squared drops out. So I'm not going to show, see, it drops out. So I'm not going to show the childish step of this part here. It just drops out. R squared goes away. When you subtract R squared from both columns, it just goes away. Similarly, we can subtract S squared from both sides. We can subtract S squared from both sides. And if you were to do that, subtract S squared from here and subtract S squared from here, that will take out this S. There you go. It's gone. Okay? So what are we left with in the first column? In the first column we are left with 2 times R times S. In the second column we are left with big fat 0. That's what they want us to compare. 2 times R times S versus 0. And what can we say about it? Well, here's what we need to talk about. I need the room, so I'm going to erase this part here. 2 times R times S. There are 3 possible scenarios. 2 times R times S. This quantity 2 times R times S is going to be 0 if either R or S or both are 0. For example, if R is equal to 0, then no matter what, regardless of what S is, if R is equal to 0, then 2 times R times S will equal 0. On the other hand, if R is not 0 but S is 0, then regardless of what R is, 2 times R times this quantity 0 is going to be 0. Or if they're both 0, then 2 times 0 is going to be 0. So that's the first scenario. 2 times R times S is going to be equal to 0. 2 times R times S is going to be 0 if either R or S or both are 0. In which case, since we're comparing it with 0, in which case the answer would have been C. The answer would have been C. But we have a but. The but part that we have here is that we are told something. We are told something on the top of the problem here, in the very top of the problem, in a very little small print here. Well, not small print. The print is always the same. We are told that R times S does not equal to 0. Since we are told that R times S does not equal to 0, that tells us that neither R. This implies that neither R nor S can be 0. It rules out that possibility. It rules out all of this possibility. This is not possible because of the fact that we are told that R times S does not equal 0. So now we have to look at the other two possibilities, which I'm going to do on this part here. The other possibility is that so that was the first scenario. Let's call it first scenario, Roman numeral 1. The second scenario is that both R and S are positive or negative. If they are both positive or negative, you see 2 times R times S right here. 2 times R times S. Let me get a better pen here. This is the pen again. 2 times R. If they are both positive, then it's 2 times some positive. 2 is a positive number, of course. 2 is a positive number. And if R is positive and S is positive, if I'm talking about a scenario where both are, they are both either positive or negative. They both have to be the same sign. That's the second scenario. If that's the case, then 2 times R times S, 2 we know is positive, R is positive, S is positive. This quantity is going to be more than 0. In which case, the answer would be, if R is positive and S is positive, the answer is going to be A. The answer in this case is going to be A. What if both R and S are negative? What if both R and S are negative? If we know that 2 is positive, what if R is negative and S is negative? It doesn't matter because negative times negative becomes positive, and again this quantity is more than 0. Answer again is going to be A. Now let's look at the third scenario. I'm running out of room very rapidly. Where should I put the third scenario? I left no room at all. I'm going to erase all of this thing. We do not need this top part here. The third scenario is of course, I want you to understand what is going on here. The work that I show in my videos, in my clips, some of them actually go on for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes 7, 8, 9 minutes typically. The work that I show in my clips, on my videos, is not something that you're going to sit there and do in the real exam. You do not have this luxury of doing this thing in such a leisurely way for 10, 15, 20 minutes. It is for learning purposes. In the real exam, you have to do all of this thing, but you have to do it fast, in your mind. Of course, you don't have to write anything down. You just have to contemplate different possibilities. What would happen if these two numbers are positive? What would happen if both of them are negative? What would happen if one is positive, the other one is negative? That's what the kind of things you're talking about. What would happen if one of them is 0? If one of them is 0, the whole quantity becomes 0. But neither of them can be 0 because we are told that R times S cannot be 0. And they want you to be able to think all of this thing in a matter of 1 minute. I'm just doing it just for the sake of learning. I'm taking my sweet time. So third scenario. Third scenario is that both. Third scenario would be one of them, either R or S. Oh geez, I don't like my writing. Either R or S is negative. The operative word here is either, not both. They cannot. We talked about both already. That was a both scenario. That was also both. Well, that was either both or either. If either of them is zero, or if they're both zero, the quantity is going to be zero, and in which case the answer would have been C. But the possibility of C has been ruled out. The answer cannot be C because it's been ruled out here. So what happens? Well, if they're both positive or if they're both negative, the answer would have been A. What happens if only one of them is positive and the other one is negative? You see, if either S or S is negative. For example here, 2 times R times S, but 2 is positive. If R is positive and S is negative, the whole thing is less than 0. Because positive times positive is positive, and that quantity times negative is going to be negative, which is less than 0. The answer here would be B, because 0 is more than a negative quantity. Or 2 is positive, but R is negative and S is positive. Again, this is going to be negative quantity because we have a positive times positive, and that's going to be negative, and that's less than 0. The answer again is B. So, the summary is that in this scenario, if either of them are positive, if one of them is positive and one of them is negative, the quantity in column B is going to be bigger. 0 is going to be bigger than a negative quantity. But if they are both positive or both negative, the answer is going to be A. And since we have no way of knowing, since we are told nothing at all about R and S, we have no way of knowing if they are both positive or if they are both negative, if one of them is negative, one of them is positive. We have no way of knowing. All we know is that they are not 0. Well, if they are not 0, then I know that the quantity in column, then we know the quantity in column A is going to be either more than 0 or less than 0. In which case the answer is either A or a B. Since we do not know, since we cannot tell it, there is no way of telling it, the correct answer is D. Et voila, that's it. That's all. Only about 29% of people who took the exam got this question right, about 3/10. 7/10 of the people who took this particular exam had trouble with this question, which is why I explained it so much. Okay? So, the beauty of this thing is that if you had trouble understanding me one time, you can always rewind it and watch it again, which is not the good old days in that case it wouldn't be good old days, it would be the bad old days where you sat in front of the instructor and you heard, and then once it's said, it's all gone forever and ever. Here you can rewind it and watch it again, see if it makes sense to you, if you had trouble understanding me the first time. Okay? But that's what it is. I hope you found it helpful. If you wish to get hold of me for personal private tutoring, I do face-to-face tutoring, one-to-one tutoring. I also tutor over the internet via Skype, and I also tutor over the telephone. If there is anything at all that I can help you in your preparation for GRE, go to my website at www.for4gre.com and send me an email. Or you can also go to www.KeshwaniPrep.com and send me an email. Alright? Thanks.